me know. Thank you. All right, so I learned today, obviously I am new to the fold, but I did learn today that you guys are called Gispians. So I wanted to say good afternoon to all the Gispians out there, and welcome to the first in a series of leadership workshops where we're really going to be spending time talking about leadership skills, tools, and the mindset needed to be an impactful leader in today's world. So the information that we're going to talk about today is going to be useful really no matter what industry or field you choose, and really even in your current roles that you're doing now. So the things that we are going to learn from our guests really can be applied anywhere. So I wanted to first share that what we're bringing today, the session today, is in partnership with the Student of Color Alliance, and I wanted to thank them for their involvement in supporting me and bringing this today. And so as a reminder, the mission of SOCA is to provide a safe space and learning environment for Gispia students of color and their allies. SOCA promotes inclusion and spreads awareness of the dangers of racial bias and microaggression. So we wanted to share that with you as well. I would also like to thank Gispia faculty and staff for supporting and bringing this together as well. And then a special shout out to Chloe Harvey, who's the social media marketing and nonprofit outreach intern, to Doreen Hernandez, the administrator for the Johnson Institute, and then Julia Santucci as well, the director who just spoke. So thank you guys as well. So again, I'm Brigette. I am the executive coach for the Hesselbein Forum, and it's been a really interesting and fun couple of months that I've been working with you all. Again, I do have office hours. I'll share information about that a little bit later, but I have had folks take advantage of those office hours, and really what I tell them during that time, it's your time. So it's my time to support you with any coaching needs, whether it be professional, thinking about things that are actually going on in school, transition, really there to support you for whatever you need. So I hope you guys get a chance to take advantage of that. So I am so excited to connect with you today, specifically because we're not connecting, right? We're not seeing people, we're not seeing folks in the halls and classrooms, connecting with folks. And so it's really important that we have these times together to be able to do that. So I want to thank you all as participants for coming today and connecting. So we have an all-star panel of guests, all of which that I know and respect both personally and professionally. And really it would take the entire session to even talk about one of their contributions. So I'm excited to have them. So I would like to thank our guests as well. But the common thread when I was thinking about each of them, connecting with them, reading through their bios that I think kind of flows through all of their work is this idea of service. And that's really service to our country, service to their leadership, service to those that they serve, and really the desire to share information with others. And so again, thank you to our panelists and guests for taking the time out today. And then one of the things that I think is unique about this panel is really that they all have not yet reached what I would consider to be like the apex of their careers, right? So they are truly still in the thick of the groundwork. And so their leadership perspective looks a lot different than someone who's in a C-suite or someone who's in executive position and is really at that 30,000 foot view. However, oftentimes this particular cohort is looked at as being experts in their areas or in their area, having an area of expertise, as well as they've mastered the art of influence, the art of advising. They spend a lot of time advising people that are major decision makers as well. And they're seen as liaisons and conduits to critical collaborations. And so I thought that that was really something special about this particular panel. So I'm going to take a moment and to kind of bring up each of their pictures. One quick note, Ismail, he is leaving another engagement, and so he'll be a little late, but he will be on the call as soon as he is able. So today we have with us Chukwudi Nwadibia, a political officer from the State Department. He has served as an economic officer in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, a consular officer in Islamabad, Pakistan, and as a political officer in Conakry, Guinea. He is fluent in French and Haitian Creole. Ismael Lopez, who will be joining us momentarily. He's a counter-narcotics operations planner for the United States Marine Corps. He's based in Colombia, South America, currently, and issues work in Latin America as a Latin America Foreign Affairs officer, working in diplomacy, security assistance, security cooperation, information operations, and a number of other things. We have with us Asha Castleberry-Hernandez. She's a distinguished national security and foreign policy expert, recently appointed to the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs in the State Department under the Biden-Harris administration, and has been pulled for countless media outlets for her expertise. And then last but certainly not least, we have Faji Kumaplay, who's a major in the US Army. Him and I served together in the Army. He's currently at Central Command in Florida, and we are extremely jealous. The weather up here is horrible. And he's fluent in French, he's conversational in U, and has a passion for US and Africa relations. Fadji has also served as a foreign area officer and in other diplomatic capacities as well. And since we do not have the ability for each person who's on the call today to introduce themselves, what I would like for you to do is to drop in the chat, drop your kind of like your status. Are you student? Are you faculty and staff? And then kind of your capacity or your major or your area of study. So if you guys could drop in the chat for me, your affiliation. So are you a student, faculty, staff member, and then what you study or what you do at the university. And so as you guys are doing that, this is giving our presenters a chance to take a look, you know, and see kind of who's in the room, who's here, who are we connecting with today. Okay, see everything coming through, awesome. All right, so as we continue to do that, the way that the series has kind of been framed is as like a workshop, right? And so what would a workshop be without some work? So I'm gonna give you guys a quick little assignment, and then we're gonna jump into the questions with our panelists and our guests. So what I need you to do is I need you to think of what do you believe to be the top leadership skills, pick no more than 3, in the field that you desire to work in the field that you desire to work in, or the field that you're currently in. What do you consider to be the top skills, the top 3 skills? And as you're doing that, what I would like you to do is, if you're like me and you have a bad memory, I want you to write them down or just kind of mentally note them, right? What are those top 3 skills in the field that I desire to go into, or in the field that I am currently in? What are those top 3, what do I believe to be the top 3 leadership skills? Okay. And what I want you to do as we begin to ask our panelists questions, as we begin to lean into this experience, is I want you guys to listen for those particular skills. Do they come up either directly or indirectly in our conversation, just so we can kind of check it against, you know, what other folks are saying or doing. And then we'll kind of come back to it a little bit at the end as well, okay? All right, quick little note about questions. So you can put questions in the chat. I have Adriana Bowman from SOCA. She is going to be supporting me with managing the chat. So the questions that you have, she is going to be taking a look at those. She is going to be kind of helping me out with asking those questions, and then I'll direct them to a panel member. We will not be able to get to every question. I'm gonna put that out there now. However, we will do our best to get to some of the questions that you guys have. And yeah, so let's jump right into our questions. So I'm going to ask the first question and then we will begin to open it up. So for each of the panelists, our guests that are here today, can you each share a little bit about what you do and why you chose the field that you are in? So I'm going to start with Asha.
Thank you everyone for having me today. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, great. Well, Yes, I am working at the State Department as a senior advisor to Near Eastern Affairs Bureau that's focused on Middle East, North Africa policy, representing the United States. The reason why I picked this field is because I love international relations. I have an international relations background. I've been involved in international relations since I was 19 when I first studied abroad in China, and then as a military officer, inspired by Miss Bethea to go in and get commissioned and learn about the world as a deployed soldier or working on intelligence. So, I'm from New York. So, when you live in a place like New York City, you're exposed to a lot of different cultures. So I pretty much applied that skill set and made it my own in my career. Sorry, what was the next question?
Yeah, so I was just sharing a bit about what you do and why you chose the field. So you shared why you chose the field. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's just pretty much working on U.S. foreign policy, making sure that we secure our strategic interests in the region. And yes, and I love doing it. And I think that in terms of representation, we need more people of color. That's one reason why I decided to go in this career too as well.
Thanks, Asha. Chukwudi, same question. So can you share a bit about what you do and why you chose that field?
Sorry, very 2020 of me. I did not unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Perfect. So like Asha, I too have been working on international relations things since I was about 19. I was a political science and IR major in college. I was a fellow with the State Department, so I kind of knew from a very young age, since I was about 20, that I was going to go work there. The reason that I chose that was, as much as it was my academic interest, it was also, I think about what did I want out of my career on a personal side. I knew that I wanted to travel. I knew that I wanted to be able to travel places for longer periods of time as opposed to just a couple weeks. And I knew that I wanted to be paid doing that. So those were some personal choices that I was like, okay, I'm interested in this. It's going to give me that opportunity. And I kind of took the jump from there. In terms of what I do, as you mentioned, I'm a political officer. I've served in a couple different roles, including, as you mentioned, as an economic officer and a consular officer. And right now I do crisis management response and crisis monitoring work. So it's a bit different at every stop, but ultimately I think the skills are definitely the same.
Thank you. And then Fadji, same question.
All right, good morning, everyone. Major Faji Kumaplay. I'm what I call in the Department of Defense, a foreign area officer. So our primary function is to serve overseas at embassies, doing primarily defense assistance, which is just a fancy way to say transferring U.S. defense articles to a host nation's military in order to improve that military so they can perform in functions that are in line with the U.S. objectives in that region. Why did I get into this field? I think to some extent, I think I was kind of influenced by my dad. He worked for the UN for a little while. So I think the development world was something that I was somewhat exposed to. Of course, military development is not as, I guess you would say, productive as foreign assistance, but in some ways, you can argue that, security is really important for a country to develop. So that's how I got into this field. I'm currently serving at CENTCOM here in Tampa, warm Tampa. I know it's the rest of the country is freezing, so I'm not going to rub it in too much. But so that's where I'm currently serving since last July.
Thanks, Fadji. And I think Isha hasn't made it on yet. Guys, get ready, kind of get your questions, begin to put them in the chat. I'm going to ask another question, and then for the next question, we'll go to one in the chat. So kind of leaning into the reason why I kind of invited you all here and why I thought that why we thought that this was really important is, oftentimes when you've already decided to go to grad school and you've already decided to kind of go into these advanced degrees and spaces, right, you are getting into a space where people know that you're a high achiever, that you're going to probably do very well technically, within your fields as you move along. It's not necessarily guaranteed, but typically if you're along this route, we know that these things are pretty much going to happen. But when we think about some of those other things, those other skills that are really critical and important to have, we don't always talk about those things. And so I thought it was really important to bring some folks together, again, who were kind of at that 15,000 foot view of leadership to kind of get your feedback. So the next question really talks about what skills and attributes do you deem to be most critical for this generation of leaders? So what skills and attributes do you deem to be most critical for this generation of leaders? And we can go in the same order, so we can start with Asha.
Yes, thank you for that question. Actually, I love it. As far as like a broad skill set, I think long-term planning, strategic planning is really important, especially in my field, where you live in a world where it could be precarious or unpredictable, or it could be predictable if you really work on your strategic planning. So a long-term vision, I think, is very important. Also maintaining a principled leadership style. I think if you maintain your leadership with some sort of principles is very important. We're starting to see that with our foreign policy right now, where we're restoring our leadership based on our principles. And as far as the technicality piece, I think right now what's really big is the STEM skill sets right now, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, where that's huge, and it's starting to become more part of the global economy. So I would encourage people to look into, if you're not getting a major in STEM, definitely acquire a skill set in STEM and more skill. Thank you.
Hey, I think that, can you hear me? Perfect. I think that in trying to drill down on in terms of what this looks like for the State Department versus other organizations, it may be similar or not, but for us, how you are able to engage with people. People is a very important skill that I think is often overlooked. And I know that in diplomacy, a lot of this is, it's either building a relationship with a contact you have, or it's building a relationship with a coworker, which is something that you're going to have across fields, whether it's IR or not. But it's something that's often overlooked. And I think that the people that go far, and then when they get there, people don't ask the question, how did this person ever end up in this position, are people that are generally effective at communicating with others, effective at playing nice with others. Some people like to roll up their sleeves and get real dirty, but at the end of the day, your social capital does really take you very far. In the State Department, we have a saying called corridor reputation, that ultimately is how you get your jobs. You can have stellar recommendations, and you can have stellar work product, and then somebody's going to ask around and say, what do you think about Bob or Joe or Sam or Virginia? And they're going to say, don't hire that person because I've heard X, Y, and Z through the grapevine about that person. And so I'd say that along the lines of engaging your social capital is don't kiss up and kick down. So I think that from a management's perspective, that's very important. I think that your written communication is very important. It's something that people don't often talk about, but at least in the State Department, strong writers tend to move forward quickly, and it is something that people will comment on fairly regularly if you are a strong writer. And so those are probably two of the skills that I would say are really important, that are less substantive in terms of do you know this information or that information, and more just regardless of what you do, whether it's in the State Department or the military or the public sector or the other parts of the public sector or the private sector, which will be very effective for you.
Real quick before Faji comments, Chukwudi, I love that you talked about kind of that your reputation basically is kind of what's set out before you. One of the things that made me think about is that oftentimes we have these kind of micro interactions that we may really think don't mean a lot, right? But that's someone's kind of first contact and or kind of memory and in the community, right? Like when in these fields, you run into the same people, you know, over and over and over and over again along your careers. If you're kind of staying along the same track, really whatever industry that looks like, you're going to continually run into the same people. So I love that you mentioned that. Thank you. All right, Fadji.
If I might just add about this running into the same people.
Yeah.
This is a huge point. Obviously, like you said, we've known each other for a long time. For those of you that don't know, I actually took a training at the State Department with Brigette. That's how we met. When I was in Guinea, I met Fadji, and randomly I found out Fadji knew Brigette, right? And even now we're in this chat, I didn't recognize Asha's name, but looking at her face, I was like, oh, we took a grad school class together. And so it's like, that all these things are linked and you might not even realize that they're linked. And I'm just sitting here and I saw her face and I was like, oh, I definitely know her. And of course, went over to LinkedIn and I was like, oh, we were at the same time. I remember your international security. I remember all this. So it is really like who you are and what people know about you, what you've done in the past. Those micro interactions do matter because you're going to end up in a workspace, especially like the State Department, where I could be managing somebody who's 20 years my senior. And that can create some difficult conversations. And so being able to negotiate that outside of the work context, but on a person-to-person level is really something that's going to help you be a successful leader or manager.
Fadji, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Brigette. And a funny tidbit, Chukwudi told me well, we found out that we both knew Brigette because I had Chukwudi over at the house once, and I have one of Bridgette's Christmas card on my fridge from like 5 years ago. But it was such a cool picture of her and Chase that I still have it in my fridge. And Chukwudi was asking me, how do you know Brigette? And, you know, that's how we connected the dots. So to answer those questions, also, let me caveat the answers by saying, you know, as a foreign air officer, I'm typically working at the operational and strategic level of the military and the Department of Defense. So my requirement for good leadership qualities might be different from somebody who's working at a tactical level in a combat unit deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. So just a caveat. So to answer those questions, for me, I believe it is flexibility and the ability to relate to peers and subordinates. For me, flexibility because we're living in a changing world. And I think from my experience and from what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis, it is no longer enough to just be an expert in your field. You have to have a broader knowledge on issues that may not even relate to you directly. So personally, even though I am a military officer, foreign air officer, I deal on a daily basis with issues such as like climate change. How is that going to affect military operations and military deployment? The pandemic, clearly, coronavirus has stopped everything from the economy to military operations, the economy, technology. So you have to be flexible enough to, yes, even though you master your field, but also have the ability to talk in a somewhat smart way about other issues that may affect you and that you may not have studied. And along with that, I believe going forward, education is going to be like a lifelong journey. Even though before you could just go to a 4 or 2 year, have your master's degree and then be set in the profession. I feel like going forward, you have to be flexible enough to continue learning either on your own or through a formal education system. The second quality, the ability to relate to peers and subordinates. And I experience that now because even though in my current position at CENTCOM, I lead a team, but the team is extremely smart with very qualified experts in their field who have been doing it for a very long time, even though they may be younger than me. So those leadership qualities needed to manage that team is different. So you have to be able to relate to that 26-year-old. Again, I don't want to date myself, but I'm in my late 30s, who is extremely knowledgeable on his or her topic. So just be able to relate to them, talk to them, because knowledge is so diffused now. Even senior leaders, executives no longer own just the monopoly of that information or that expertise. So again, to summarize, you have flexibility and then the ability to relate to peers and subordinates.
Thank you. And I think too, talking about this idea of working generationally is very, very crucial. You're going to get to your place of work, or you're at your place of work, and you're really working with folks from all different types of generations that have that value things differently, and that impacts their way of work, right? And so it's not none of it's bad, it's just different, but it brings different like strengths to the table. So having some kind of ideas of what that is and what that looks like as it relates to those strengths is really crucial and key. So I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Adriana really quickly and see if there's some questions in the chat, and so we can take some questions from you guys.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So one question was, internships are really limited within the State Department, and not everyone has previously served in the military. So could you all recommend ways for master's students to get their feet in the door as a stepping stone to launching their careers in like international affairs development?
It's a great question. Is there any of the panelists who want to take that question?
I'll take it. Oh, I'll go.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
You got it. Go ahead.
We'll start with Asha, and if there's a little bit of time, we'll go over to Chukwudi.
There's within the last several years, there's been an emerging term called fellowships, and there's a lot of them right now, where you can, while you're in grad school, you can apply for a fellowship, which is like a pipeline into the State Department, like the Charlie Rangel Fellowship, the Braun Fellowship, the Payne Fellowship, and then also with internships. What we're hearing from the new Secretary of State is that he's trying to attract more people and also diversify more candidates as far as the pool in recruiting. So I think there's gonna be lots of opportunities, and also to look into your congressional representatives who happen to also have fellowships into the State Department, or they work closely with the think tanks to recruit people into government. But you need to contact your congressional representative. So there's different ways, but also look into working closely with think tanks too that can help facilitate that as well.
Go ahead, Chukwudi.
I think that she's touched on all the major things. I think that if you are really looking to go to the State Department, a PMF fellowship, a Presidential Management Fellow Fellowship is a great thing to apply for. I've worked with a number of them across government agencies, including the State Department, a number of times. I know that there are virtual internships depending on what type of work it is you're trying to do. Those are available year round, but especially right now during COVID, we have one in our office. And I know there are regular internships both at the State Department and overseas. I'm not that aware of the deadlines for applying to those, but because they're offering them at different times, there should be somewhat of a rolling application basis. But if you're trying to go somewhere else, I mean, any experience is good, and to join the State Department from a long-term perspective, you don't need to have had an internship with the State Department to do that.
I also, go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry, go ahead. Okay, so I agree. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a loss. I don't have much experience with internships. Being in the service, that's all I've known really since they got me right out of college. So I'll refer back to Chukwudi and Asha on that.
One of the things that I'm thinking about too, as it relates to internships and finding, I think there's a couple things. I don't know if your programs have internship requirements. I know some do. So it sounds like, yeah, Julia's shaking her head. Yes, so many of them do have internship requirements. Don't be afraid of the unpaid internship. Don't be afraid of trying to get somebody to call you an intern, even if it's more of a volunteer status, depending on what it is. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about, kind of some of grassroots efforts. So there may be a way to connect, like if you're not getting kind of some of the State Departments or the different 3 or 4 letter agencies to bring you on potentially as a intern, there may be other internships, in the public sector and other sectors that also are impacted by some of the work that they do. So being thoughtful about, like, if I look at the chain of everything where I would love to have my dream internship, if I look at the chain of all of those things that thing touches, looking for an internship somewhere within that chain link could also be really beneficial as well. All right, what other questions do we have from the chat?
Yes, so another question was, what have you learned about your own strengths and also areas in need of further development, and how do you engage in continuous learning and growth as a leader?
That's a great question. That was actually one of my questions. So good job. Whoever put that question in there is an excellent question. Say the question one more time, Adriana. It was a big one.
So one, what have you learned about your own strengths and areas in need of further development? And then two, how do you engage in continuous learning and growth as a leader?
I'll like to answer that. You know, as a military officer too, watching wonderful people like Bridget, you know, she used to stand in front of our battalion and just speak in front of everyone. And she was like 18, 19 at that time. It was everyone. I couldn't do that at that time. But then when I went and got commissioned and learned how to speak, do a lot of public speaking, especially forced by 2 stars and 3 stars to present in front of them, I broke out of that barrier. And then next you know it, going into national security, spoke a lot on TV about national security, and just, you know, been on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and I acquired that skill set as just building up my confidence. And that also helps me to this day, speaking at a place like the state.
Oh, we have a little bit, looks like she's frozen.
Color, where we have to not look like us, but, you know, certain skills. I also want to add on to the other panelists. Writing is very important. That's a work in progress all the time. It's like working out. You never stop working out. So I just want to also add on that point too. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that question?
I think for me personally, in terms of trying to find that continuous growth that both Asha and Fadji touched on, is being open to new things at work, right? I'm a political officer. Most of what we do is analyze things and write about them. So I get a lot of practice on writing. But when it comes to managing pots of money or managing people or project management, that's not something that we really do. And so I've taken a lot of pains to put myself in a position to where that would be something I had to do to make sure that I learned that skill. I may turn out to be no good at it, which is fine, but you won't know that if you don't ever put yourself in the position and kind of force yourself. I'm not one of those people that's gonna, you know, get myself a master's on the side. Like, I need to be focused. That needs to be what I'm doing, and that's what I'm focused on. So, I mean, for me, it's really about putting yourself in a position of being open to trying new things and humble enough to receive the feedback, though sometimes critical, from people who might be able to lend a hand in helping you accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
And I think that was a really good question, Adriana. So to answer the first one, what have I learned about my own strength is how resilient and how creative you can be if you're following your passion. So I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, because I have a passion for service development, like I talked about, and, you know, serving my country. And having been through some tough assignments, you know, when you think you're about to break down, you've reached your last mile. It's really amazing how much strength you can find in yourself as long as you're following your passion. Clearly, it's easy to say, you know, but it's also have to be a passion that is somewhat pays enough, right, for you to live on. But I think you have to balance both. But I think when it does come to a head, I think passion should outweigh money. Because I think it will give you over the long haul, it will give you the strength and resilience you need to go for the extra mile. For the second question, how do you engage in lifelong learning? For me, I found that humility has been the biggest asset in being able to learn all along, and accepting some jobs and assignments that may not look flashy initially, but that ended up being the most rewarding and extremely valuable ones for me. I know Chukwudi can attest to our time together in Guinea, which was not an easy easy environment, and also not a very a job of a high priority for the Department of Defense and for AFRICOM as a whole. But it ended up being one of the most enriching assignments for me. So those were my answers.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of times that I've had like what I would think of as being like, oh, this is going to be a sucky job or a sucky assignment. You know, like I'm not gonna like this task, and oftentimes those are ones that I've grown the most from, kind of that have stretched me professionally. Even if it's something maybe that I think to somebody said, like, even something I'll never do again, you know, it's something that stretched me in that space. There is, let me see, I'll say the next question. This one's from our director. It says, we talk about leadership at every level. When did you first start to think of yourself as a leader? Was there an aha moment? Love this question. Does anybody want to take that?
I'll hop in here. I think I went to Morehouse College, right? And so at my school, I can't speak for all schools. It's an HBCU, it's small, it's in Atlanta, and it's all male. So a lot of what we do is about leadership. And one thing that they would always impress upon us is that you may not necessarily be the face of whatever it is that's happening. And I think this gets to some of what Fadji was saying, is that you may not be the face. And in government, you're almost never the face. You're almost always doing this for somebody else who's gonna then go and then do X, Y, or Z. So at that point, leadership isn't so much like, how do I galvanize everybody behind what it is I'm doing? It's, okay, how do I contribute to this and move this process along in a constructive manner? Sometimes it's making a suggestion to somebody else for their action, right? Sometimes it's saying, hey, you said this and I'm seeing that everybody else may not have received this the way that you think they wanted to receive it. And then at other times it is you getting up in front of everybody and trying to marshal everybody onto one accord. But I think that the idea that you have to, I should say, people were very quick to criticize the idea of leading from behind. If everybody recalls the 2012 going into Libya thing, when we criticized former president at the time, Barack Obama. But I think at the end of the day, it's about, how do I help our team achieve this goal? That is what leadership is about. And it's not about credit. It's not about where you are on that. It's like, if you ever played a sport, everybody kind of has a role, and your leadership is executing your role to the best of your ability, and then seeing to the rest of your team, I have extra bandwidth. How can I help this team achieve its goal faster, better, more efficiently, whatever the case may be?
Who else remembers their aha moment? I'm trying to think of mine.
Yeah, so if I can go next, that was a good one. Chukwudi and I wholeheartedly agree. For me, I guess, when you talk about definition of leadership, which is, the ability to influence others to do something that either you want them to do or that they wouldn't have otherwise done. So that's how you define leadership. At least that's how I define it. So for me, the aha moment for me was, I believe I was a young captain in Iraq for my second deployment. I was the youngest guy on the team. We were a team of trainers to an Iraqi border unit. And actually my nickname during that deployment was Grasshopper, because I was 26 at the time. So I believe it was during a mission pre-brief that I gave, and I used the term. And so during the mission, our team leader, started using that same term in a way to get the team going. So to me, I think that that was an aha moment, for me to have as a young captain, to have a lieutenant colonel, go ahead and start using my terms. To me, I think at that point, that's when I realized, well, I think maybe I'm having an impact here, and maybe this is what being a leader looks like. Being able to get people to start using your terms, not necessarily just your terms, but start doing things that you have either recommended or that you have, that you have embraced. So, yeah, in a nutshell, that was my aha moment.
I have a thought about that, like, for, never underestimate the power of influence, right? We should never underestimate the power of influence. although, you know, we may not yet be at that position that we aspire to be, oftentimes we are in excellent position to be able to influence and shape, you know, what's happening in the leadership situation. So there's this idea of being a really good steward of, you know, the fact that I'm in a position to influence what's happening, you know, at my job, in this task, you know, in the government, you know, wherever you are in this NGO that I'm working with or working for, or the people that I'm serving, right? Like as you're connecting to your work, right, that skill of understanding the power of influence is very, very key. And I think, not that I'm going to talk about my aha moment necessarily, but for me, I think that was definitely at least the aha of the fact that, man, like I have influence as a young emergent, you know, leader in a lot of spaces. And when I say something, people are actually listening to me. And so I have to be really thoughtful about what it is that I'm saying. I can't just put anything out there because people are genuinely listening to me. Leaders who are at that 30,000 foot view don't have the time to focus on some of those things, you know, those what we maybe consider smaller things. So they're going to look to us, right? They're going to look to you to be able to give them information and feedback. And that's an amazing position to have. Asha, did you have any thoughts on your aha moment?
Yes. You know, sometimes I just don't do good with norms or like conventional wisdom. I don't think that's the answer to everything.
Trying to see if she comes back in.
In the national security field, I felt that we need to be a little different and bring in diversity into national security. So I started my own organization called Diversity National Security Network, where we recruit.
Asha, if you can hear me, you are frozen and your audio is breaking up.
And why did I do that? Well, going beyond just challenging a norm, I felt like when I was in an institution trying to reform their own institution, it just wasn't working. They're moving slow. They weren't that interested, despite this. They said, oh, we're interested. So I said, okay, I'm gonna just start my own thing. And a lot of people are not just creators or just starting their own thing or starting their own business. So I said, you know, I'd like to start something from scratch, roll up my sleeves and see what we could do from here. And that's what I did.
So I think the part that might have cut out, Asha, is that you started your own diversity initiative because you weren't seeing those initiatives necessarily in the places that you were working. And she was saying like, hey, I didn't see something, so I started my own thing. There is, that's a, what's the word? A golden nugget. Like it's almost like you may not get, okay. Yeah, and Asha, your audio may improve if you turn your camera off. You may have to turn your camera off. Okay, but you know, that's a golden nugget, right? This idea of I may not get everything that I need from my job, or may not be able to impact everything that I want to impact at my job because of my current position, or whatever. Maybe it's not my lane, or you know. But there's this idea of being able to have kind of these entrepreneurial these things that you're working on where you can still push those things forward. So as an individual, right, you're still feeling full and fulfilled in the work that you're doing and touching. And so I am definitely an advocate of that as well. So thank you, Asha, for that. We do have a question that was given by Soka, which I think is a good time to ask it because really we're in that space. What do you feel is the importance of diversity and inclusion, especially in the realm of international affairs or development?
I can answer that again. I'll do it with my camera off.
Excellent audio.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
It's excellent, yes.
Okay, great. So why do I think it's important? Well, representation matters. And also when it comes to policy making, when you are making policy and you come and say like you're a homogeneous a community of people, you don't think of the best ideas. You don't maximize your innovation the expertise, things you need to know in terms of being effective as far as crafting policy. But if you do it within a heterogeneous community, you will be able to maximize your effectiveness. So that is really important when it comes to why diversity inclusion needs to be included. And it's not just an American principle, but it also shows an effectiveness when it comes to crafting policy.
I couldn't agree more. I think I would even say that it's extremely important. I also listened to a chat the other day where people were considering this a question of national security. And I think that at least in my experience, right, is that it's not just that people can't think of the, better policy initiatives, right, to implement or how to implement it. It's how it's received. I think people tend to have an assumption that there is that the person on the receiving end of that policy or that talking point or that brief, whatever that conversation is agnostic as to who delivers it, and who said what is very important. If the ambassador says something versus when I say something, that matters, right? Like the ambassador speaks for the president. I'm a guy, right? And yes, I work for the ambassador, but it doesn't carry the same weight. So I think it's a question of also perspective in terms of, well, how are we going to be able to envision how this is received? What type of language would be effective here? There's really a lot, I think, that goes into that people overlook in the assumption that one policy, regardless of who says it or who concocted it, it will be received in the same way. And I think that if you look at some of our historical baggage in places like Latin and South America, right, or even when we were working in Guinea, Fadji, is that there's, for instance, the historical baggage the French had in that country that we didn't have. So in different places, you need to really kind of think, okay, it's not just about the diversity of the people on our side. Perhaps it's, well, maybe we as a mission or a country can be the best person to have this conversation with them. Maybe it should be the UN. Maybe it should be. So this question of diversity I think it's more than just who we decide to put in the room on our side. It's really thinking about, well, how do people engage on these, and how do their past experiences influence how they might tackle this issue? And that really gets to the crux of why it's so important for us to make sure that within our own country and our own teams, that we have very rounded perspectives and rounded approaches to whatever problem that it is that we're tackling.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Chukwudi. And I think, yeah, I'm in agreement with everyone. I think diversity is extremely important. And for the Department of Defense, that's why I think it's been, it is really important. It's an important topic that the Secretary of Defense actually went ahead and asked for all the services to find a day to have a stand down for the next 2 months to address some of the issues that the Department of Defense and the military services are facing when it comes to extremism and some behaviors that are that go against the concept of diversity and having a united force. I think it is important also, not just for the reasons I mentioned before, but also for really practical reasons, how it makes us a much better force out there in the world. So 3 things. I think the first one is, I'm sure you've heard by now the term great power competition, how as a nation, we're trying to compete with other rising powers to maintain our advantage. And in that competition, I think our diversity is our strength, because some of those other actors cannot call on, some members of their societies that can speak multiple languages or that have these technical skills. A good colleague of mine, I'll mention his name, but he used to say, in a really funny way, but a really interesting way, he was like, if Poland wants to grow, a Spanish speaker who has these qualities and who has this experience serving overseas or whatnot, they can't. They have to start from zero, from when they're born, and like put him in that fashion, put him in that system to be able to have these skills by the time he or she is 30. In the US, we're such a diverse nation that whatever the quality you need, to some extent, whatever the language, the skill set, the travel experience you need, you can find it. we are such a diverse nation. You can find it and bring him or her to the table to address some of the issues you're facing. And I cannot tell you to what extent other actors globally are jealous of our diversities. I've served, especially with the French, working overseas, working in Africa. The French military is heavily present. And they will tell me, you guys can bring anybody to the table, like somebody, not to like to my own horn, but speak French, is knowledgeable in the local culture, and can navigate those issues, have better access to them. And that is something that not a whole lot of nations can say they have. So it is extremely important for practical reasons. It is.
Thank you. And then Adriana, I think there might have been one more question in the chat. If you can throw that one out there for us, we'll try to hit that one before we break.
Yes. So imposter syndrome is something we talk about a lot. Imposter syndrome, I don't know if everyone heard that. Have you experienced imposter syndrome in your career and as a leader? And if so, what are ways you've been able to overcome this?
Yes, I have. And I'll give you one example. I remember sitting in Security Council with the U.S. delegation. I was sitting behind we had the Russians, the French, and going on and on and on about, a policy that they were speaking about. And, as a,
Asha?
oh, can you hear me?
I can. You mind turning your camera off?
Okay, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, so so I remember sitting in Security Council, and I was inspired by a woman like her saying, "Wow, she can do that. Wow, that's awesome. I can't do that." Knowing that she was a Black woman just like me, I was saying I could never do that, and then I had to snap out of it. Being able to an entire security, your imposter syndrome still kicks in. So it's it's natural, but it's something that you have to get over through confidence.
Anyone else have any thoughts on imposter syndrome if they've experienced it? Thank you, Asha.
I can say I've absolutely experienced it. I experienced it when I started my current role. And it's just one of those things where you kind of feel like I don't belong. You feel like, man, everybody else's everything is a little bit shinier than mine, or might be. And I think that the way that I was able to move through that was talking to other colleagues about it, and just kind of like seeing like, okay, is this just a me thing, or does everybody else feel like this? Mm-hmm. And through those conversations, it became clear that, oh, everybody else felt the exact same way I felt. I was just internalizing this as a me thing. And then secondly, of course, is that you got to have your support network outside of this, because they're like that type of, when you work in these environments where everybody's the smartest wherever they were, right? Not even that I was the smartest where I was coming from, but everybody else is the smartest wherever they were, and was this and had this accolade. And it's kind of like you kind of get there and you're like, okay, do I measure up? And I think that sometimes grounding yourself in your environment outside of that work environment is very helpful, because whatever value you believe that you have absolutely does not come from what you do in your 9 to 5, right? And so I think it makes it easier, at least it made it easier for me to step back and say, okay, well, I'm Chukwudi, I'm me. I feel like I hold it down. Let me go back to this job and approach it with that confidence, like Asha was saying, and just saying like, I know I can do this. Like the only person second guessing me is me. And I got to move through that and my own questions about that and push forward.
Yes, and it is a real syndrome, and I've experienced it too. I'm looking like the way I look, having a name like mine in a service that is, especially when I started, when I was in the Common Arms, there wasn't a lot of people looking like me, and it wasn't easy. At times, you doubt yourself. So the way I was able to deal with it, I think now looking back, initially it wasn't intentional. I think it was just, it just happened to be that I was able to get pretty strong allies early on. So the key thing, I think the number one thing I have to tell you is like find allies, find good allies that may or may not look like you, but that will be able to see in you the struggle you're going through, the fight you're fighting, and you'll be able to tell those allies real quick because they will come to you. They will come to, at least in my sense, in my case, they come to me and then they will try to encourage you. They will see the qualities in you and they will tell you that yes, you can do this. And you know, and sometimes when you start to doubt yourself, the second way I've been able to deal with it, again, you know, I don't know if it is okay within this forum, but this, so I don't know if you know about this gospel song, you know, This Little Light of Mine. I used to be really shy and doubting myself a lot. And then recently, I think I've come to a point where it's not you know, that I don't give an F, but I'll just tell myself, you know, I have a little light of mine in me and I'm just gonna let it shine. And like, you know, if it blinds somebody, so be it. You know, they can put on some shades. Otherwise, you know, I'm just gonna be myself. And I've found that to be actually really, really good because then you can just be really your authentic self, you know, not be afraid or shy or ashamed of who you are and just let your light shine. So that's my that's my advice on imposter syndrome.
Ooh, can I piggyback on one thing, one term
Go
that
ahead.
you dropped right there, which is the authentic self. And this has been a big part of, I know for years, I took a leadership course at the State Department. It must have been 2017 or 16. And this is something that we were talking about. And I think it's only become more apparent how important that is in the years since. And it is really, really important that when you come to work, that you feel that your team supports who it is you are, right, in its entirety. Sometimes you can be in organizations which it may appear as if that may not be the case in some pockets of that organization, but at the end of the day, on the team on which you are in and serving on, that's really important. And I think that just that in and of itself, right, feeling that you can come to work and be who it is you are, that also goes a long way to moving past that imposter syndrome, because a lot of that question is, do I have value and do I fit in with this group? And if you feel that you have to take a part of yourself and put it in a box until you get back home, it's going to feel hard for you to feel seen by those people and feel like you fit in and feel like you have value, because they're not seeing who you are. They're seeing whatever caricature you've presented to them. And of course, you know, you can't air your Saturday conversations at work, but it is important that at least when you go to work that you're not actively concealing large portions of your personality, because that's just not tenable, and it really does fester and it contributes to that imposter syndrome.
So I thought that was very, very, very great, I think, comments and advice in that space. And I love that Fadji talked about singing This Little Light Is Mine. I was laughing. I think my mic was on when I was laughing, but not in a bad way, in a good way. But I think to that point, right, like oftentimes we will try to either dumb down or kind of shrink in order to make others feel comfortable. But if you are like the person who is hot and on it and you got it together and you're confident, you know, you want to make sure that you're putting that stuff out there, because really, honestly, right now, the type of leader that we need is the authentic leader. The type of leader that we need is the leader who's not afraid to say things or afraid to, you know, support and give recommendations on certain decisions that may be made by their leadership, right? We need that. Those skills are going to be super important. All right, one of the things I asked you guys to write down, 3 things, your top 3 things. If you heard any of those skills that you mentioned or that you noted down, I want you to throw those in the chat. So if you heard communication, if you heard writing skills, if you heard all of those things that you thought were the top skills that you think that you should have, either going into the field of your choice or in your current field, throw those in the chat. I want you guys to throw those in the chat. Communication initiative. Flexibility in communication. Communication is key, right? Not directly mentioned, but related. Authentic self, vulnerability. Love vulnerability is a great one. Confidence, influence, yes. Communication, confidence. One of the things I want you guys to kind of look at as you're looking, right? We're getting data right now. There's a bunch of us in here. We're getting some data around what people thought was most important. We got some data from our panelists about, what things were basically what worked for them, the skills that they see as being important. And now we're kind of taking a look and seeing where all that kind of intersects. Self-knowledge, yes, all that is really key, open to change. Empathy. Empathy, vulnerability are two terms that I think are not talked a lot about in the workplace, but are very key and very important, especially when you're in situations where you're dealing with certain populations or you're supporting certain efforts, and even to your boss or to to the people that you work with. So those are really strong. All right. As we begin to transition in the next part of our session today, I wanted to let you guys know of 2 more opportunities to connect. We're going to be continuing this leadership workshop series, and up next we have leadership toolkit, right? So we talked about some skills and skill set. The next thing we're going to be talking about is a leadership toolkit, and we're going to be talking about the power of storytelling. I have a ethnographer, someone who is an expert in the art of storytelling, and who is going to support us with finding some stories. We're going to do a little bit of a workshop during that one to find some stories that are going to be really key and crucial that you can use in your own experiences. And then next, after that, we'll have the leadership mindset, why being brilliant isn't enough. And I'll be the one facilitating that particular session. Interesting that the last questions talked about imposter syndrome. I'm currently getting my doctorate and I'm writing my dissertation on the imposter syndrome. So I didn't want to go too much into detail because I start to geek out about it, but I am looking forward to being able to talk about some of those things as well during that session. This is my information. So I am the Hesselbein Forum Executive Coach. That is my email. My office hours are Thursdays from 3 to 7. I am going to, if I can find it quickly, I am going to drop in the chat my Calendly so that you guys can schedule with me. But every Thursday from, one second, doing too much. Every Thursday from 3 to 7, I'm available for office hours. Hopefully, I think that came through. Oh, no, it didn't. All right, that's my Calendly, so you can schedule with me for office hours from 3 to 7, anytime from 3 to 7 p.m. on Thursdays. Or if you need time outside of that time, you can just shoot me an email. We can find something that works for you guys. So on behalf of Soka and myself, we wanted to thank you guys for spending some time with us during this first session. We are getting ready to transition in the second session. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. And then we will come back. So it's 2:05. We'll come back at 2:10 to do our second session. And so thank you for your participation. And the next session is really focused on BIPOC students, BIPOC faculty, staff, for us to come together and have some more time with our panelists today. So thank you guys, and I will return in about 5 minutes. Doreen, if you're still near your computer, you can go ahead and stop recording at this time, please.